I know these conferences get crazy, so I really appreciate everyone getting out and coming here. We launched our virtual power plant liftoff report this morning, so kudos to the big team that did that. I think Jen is here in the front. She's doing her own panel at 1:30, and I think she had 200 customer interviews and all sorts of stuff that's in there. So if you haven't seen it yet, let's get there. I asked Lon to join me on stage this morning because I do think that our industry continues to have friction, frankly, with the utility industry. Let's call it. Let's call it friction.
It.
Yeah, exactly. And no one is enemy number one more than Lon Huber. No, kidding. So Lon is now at Duke Energy and is leading the charge on the virtual power plants and all the work there. And so I wanted to maybe talk through some of the complexity that we have in working together to meet this vision that we have for a more flexible grid. As many of you know, we have for a long time had a flat load curve, right? So we basically use the same number of terawatt hours today that we used in 2003. That all is changing, right? Today we're adding megawatts of EV loads every week to grids around the country. We are adding, through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, hundreds of new manufacturing facilities, some of which have 180 megawatts of load, and folks are giving them 3-year interconnection timelines. And so we need to move faster, and so we need to do things differently. And as a result, some of the things that we need to do differently is figuring out how we actually make demand as flexible as we currently only rely on supply to do. So with that, part of this conversation was figuring out how we bury the hatchet with the utility companies. My sense is that as the electric utility companies move to meet a lot of these loads, they're going to rely on the expertise of the 40,000 plus people who are here at RE+, along with our brothers and sisters across the rest of the industry, to figure out how to actually get this stuff installed safely and make sure it all works for consumers and for electric utility companies. So with that, give a warm welcome to Lon Huber.
I'll get another one, yes, all right.
All right, Lon.
Feels good.
Why don't we start with you actually telling everybody what you really do?
So, all right, I'll give a little bit of the origin story, and then
there you go.
And then, so I actually started in the solar industry. So I worked in the solar industry longer than I have in the utility industry so far, and I got to see the industry from different angles: manufacturing, sales, finance, and so forth. And then from there, worked in consulting for commissions, consumer advocates, and so forth, and part of some of the big net metering wars in Arizona and elsewhere. And then an opportunity presented itself at Duke and leading up our customer solutions. And so that's everything from demand response, energy efficiency, community solar, rate design, electric vehicles, and I couldn't say no because I feel like the utilities now are ready. They're ready to really embrace a lot of this new technology that's out there. And we'll talk about why that is, but I'm in this great position now where I get to implement and execute on this future where Duke Energy has net zero carbon targets that are really serious, and there's interim goals, and in some cases it's actually in state law. So we have those net zero targets with increasing load, huge amount of economic development coming to our states, and just residential population growth in general. So we've got to deploy resources and all the above strategy to meet that demand that's coming in. And customer-sided resources, distributed power plants, we see that as a great way to help deliver, keep the lights on and going in the future.
So let's just tee up the net metering friction. Certainly don't mean to cause any emotional distress for folks in the room.
Trigger warning.
But look, I think that there has always been a fight around pure net metering basically having a couple of issues. One is that there was perceived to be a cost shift from the folks receiving net metering to the folks who live next to them. But the other piece of this is that that those systems in general didn't really provide you backup power when you lost the grid, right? Because as many of you know, with IEEE 1541 or other standards, right, the solar systems have to safely shut down if the grid isn't there. And so now you're seeing a tremendous number of people adding batteries to their solar systems. And so I think you see that on the exhibition floor here where everybody has a VPP offering, I think. And so, I think, frankly, I think we all should just be calling this industry the virtual power plant industry. So, all right.
Absolutely.
That's what you are now. Just make sure you tell your friends. In terms of where that's headed, right? So Hawaii got rid of net metering in 2015. Frankly, fairly rough transition, frankly.
Sorry.
But California is doing the NEM 3.0 thing, right? And in NEM 3.0, they're basically saying that you get paid less for export. And so you're sort of incentivized to make sure you use all the power within your household, right? Once you do that, then your house is basically its own little microgrid, right? You basically can, save power. You're not disconnected from the grid, but you have this ultimate flexibility to perform like a microgrid. So why does that change things for you, right? Because you guys negotiated a settlement that looked a lot like that with Vote Solar, Sunrun, and SIA, I think. Right? And so,
that's right, yeah.
So why is that different for you than traditional net metering?
Well, fundamentally, it's about getting the right price signals out there, first off. Two, it's about encouraging dispatchability, and that's key. So you've got a more fair and equitable compensation structure. And everybody talks about cost shift, and I've done cost of service enough to know that the real angle with DERs, with rooftop solar, it's more of an opportunity cost. So if you're paying 35 cents for intermittent power and a customer would easily transact and buy at 20 cents, you've got this surplus that you could have allocated to other people on the network, right? And so the key there is getting that compensation right, encouraging dispatchability. And the VPP opportunity is one that can sort of reset the conversation. And so what we did is we just said, hey, just blank slate it. Where do we want things to go? What do we need from the industry going forward? And so we all just sat in a room. We left all of the baggage behind us, right? And we said, all right, these are the attributes that we need. And we've got to take care of winter morning at 6 a.m. There's not a lot of sun at 6 a.m. in the winter, right? And how can we do that? What can we bring? And so we said, okay, we've got to let's at least start with smart thermostats in solar, move to batteries in solar, get more advanced inverter settings, right? So we started just brainstorming, and we came together, utility and solar industry just locked together in front of the regulators, and we made this pitch.
And what did the regulators say?
One said, nice try. The other said, yeah, and in fact, why don't you skip the thermostat, go straight to battery storage? And so they said, file a program, 60 megawatts of solar plus storage. And so that's pending in front of the regulator. And I think it underscores a key concept, which is the future that most of us want, it's dependent on having conversations that we haven't had before. Right? It's about having new types of conversations about some of the possibilities that are out there. And that's what fair and equitable compensation, integration to our system, and dispatchability bring, which are hallmarks of VPP, right?
Right.
So it allows us to have these new conversations of possibility and shed some of the old stories that we all cling to. Because quite frankly, some of the stories, whether you're anti-solar or you're anti-utility, holding on to these old stories, there's a cost to that. You're missing opportunities by just saying, oh, utility's evil or solar industry doesn't know what they're doing, right? And so it allowed us to break out of that and work together to bring something great in front of the regulator.
That's great. All right, there's all these people standing up in the back. We have tons of chairs. Come on up.
Well, there's like 4 here, but yeah.
Yeah, we have like 4. All right, so it feels like we need to build up the energy. How about we try something? How about we all say, we are VPP? Come on, chanting. That's how we do this.
That is just.
All right.
Come on.
All right. So I think we got there, right? Now we're talking about a 60 megawatt pilot, right? Which, as you know, these guys are going to fill up next Sunday.
I hope.
So how do we get to a much higher level of penetration? And does that actually scare you guys at Duke Energy? Like if we got to 20% of rooftops with, this structure that you're suggesting with dispatchability, is that something you guys are comfortable with?
With that structure, which, again, the cost effectiveness, the integration to our system, the dispatchability, that doesn't scare me at all. In fact, we have over 1 million connected devices today. Now, they're in a different type of mode. They're bulk system mode, right? And it's not like, completely two-way. So we've have a lot of experience with a type of distributed power plant, grid edge resources, VPP, out there today. And with hundreds of thousands of customers enrolled, whether that's hot water heater programs, which we use a lot for ancillary services and so forth. So we have experience with this over a decade plus of coordinating this, orchestrating this with the grid to drive a lot of value. And we found business models that work for both parties. And so, for instance, in an integrated utility, we can take all those value streams, tie them together, NPV from 20 years, and give you or the customer a lump upfront payment to help with the financing, right? So cut the financing down, help with that sales value proposition to them. So we have experience with it. You get that right setup, which we have in a lot of our states through our demand response mechanisms and cost effectiveness. I would be happy to get 20%.
All right, so you heard it here first. Duke Energy wants you guys to fill up 20% of their residential rooftops with solar plus batteries.
Have to have dispatchability, has to be cost effective, but
we didn't hear that part.
Yeah.
but I appreciate it. All right, so now let's shift the conversation a little bit to how this ties to your load growth, right? Because you're going on to distribution circuits where a lot of these homes are drawing 1 kilowatt, 2 kilowatts, generally continuous. And now you're adding sort of level 2 chargers at 7.6 kilowatts. And so how does all this work together in your mind to actually help you onboard more heat pumps, more electric vehicles, more electrify everything? You're going to have to upgrade some of the distribution systems, but the goal here, when you look at the Brattle report that came out and others, is that, that this will actually be able to allow you to increase the asset utilization of your existing distribution circuits without having to upgrade them all.
Yeah, so I guess I always start with just the reality. So don't get high in your own supply type of phrase, which is there is definitely a lot of savings.
We got a lot of supply here.
Yeah, that can happen, but we have to recognize what's happening on the ground, which is we've got a lot of aged distribution assets. So you're not going to get rid of a transformer. Can you maybe downsize one? That's a definite possibility, but there's a lot of aged transformers out there that will need to be replaced. There'll be new transformers that have to go in with new load growth or new EV charging stations. So there's that. The other thing is the amount of load that we're seeing come into states is just unprecedented. I was talking to one utility. They just got 2 interconnection requests for 2 1.8 gigawatt data centers. 2 1.8 gigawatt data centers. So that's hard to VPP yourself out of, right?
No, the best way to do that is just tell them to put a nuclear plant right in the center of that thing.
So there are some basic realities, but when you think about the possibility of, remember when I was saying integrate into that system, you have that visibility, and you have managed charging programs all throughout, right? So when you have an EV, you're part of maybe you have a menu of different managed charging.
Well, let's pause there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your managed charging stuff. You guys had a big announcement sort of 10 days ago.
That's right.
On managed charging.
Yeah,
Explain to everybody what we're talking about here.
We launched a subscription offering, so it's all you can smart charge for $24.99. And it goes through the vehicle modem. You don't need to have a separate meter for this. It's open ADR, and we're sending complex price signals.
The vehicle modem meaning the software that's on your car.
That's right. So it's OVGIP. So this is a platform used by like Ford, GM, and so forth, right? And so we can send those signals, and we can hold the charging during peak. And again, it's not that often we have to do it, right? So it's not an inconvenience.
It might be in the future, not now. But basically you're saying up to 800 kilowatt hours a month, for $24.99 because you got to put a cap on it, and that's a lot. So I mean, if they get the full 800 kilowatt hours, that's like 3 cents a kilowatt hour to recharge your car. And then there are certain hours of the day that you say, like, your car charging is making it more stressful on the grid, so we're not going to allow you to charge these, like, this 2 hours. Like, so, because the average EV owner plugs in their car for 13 hours and only charges for 3 of it. So it doesn't really matter to them when it hits the full 80% state of charge, as long as it's there when they're done.
And they tell us like when they want their car charged, but for our service territories, our peak is winter morning, right? And so usually by then the car has a decent amount of charge. And so I think in the future, I think you're right, we will use it more, but it won't be for the bulk system. It'll be for the distribution system. And that's really the possibility, and it gets to your previous question, which is once you have all these things integrated, you're able to orchestrate them on the distribution level. So now you have a localized use case, which will save from having to do a significant amount of upgrades to handle that type of load. So that's where those savings come in. And again, that starts to happen when you get that high amount of adoption.
All right, let's shift to low, moderate income consumers, right? So in general, I think there's another thing that you guys did recently, which was, add a feature to figure out how to help low, moderate income consumers with on-bill financing. But it's not on-bill financing, it's Duke Energy special on-bill financing.
That's right.
All right, so describe for everybody what that looks like, and then we can talk about why it's so important.
All right, we think we cracked the code to a lot of issues out there. So we call it on-tariff financing. The financing is connected to the meter, not the customer. So you don't have to run the credit checks. You don't have to tie it to them. It doesn't follow them if they move. They don't have to pay it off if they move. It's tied to the meter. And so you can do, like, say, a brand new HVAC system, high performance, and for the most part, no money down, especially when you connect it with IRA and other incentives, and they save from day one. And so the new homeowner coming in, there'll be a disclaimer, but they're saving on the bill just coming into that. So they'll see a little bit of that charge, but we think that this is financially scalable. It's a way to get to that next level of energy efficiency upgrades, because we've already, just in the Carolinas, installed equivalent of 1 nuclear power plant of energy efficiency over the past 6-7 years. So that took away a lot of the low-hanging fruit. Now the next stuff, there's upfront costs to that. So we think this on-tariff financing is going to unlock that, and especially for multifamily, because the split incentive issue gets solved through this type of mechanism. So we're really excited. The regulators just approved it last month, and we're going to be launching soon.
So basically the way this works is that if I'm staying somewhere, renting or whatever it is, but I'm responsible for paying for these things, it gets financed through the tariff. If I leave that location after 3 years, the next tenant starts paying that. It's not my responsibility to pay it off, right?
That's right.
And I think part of the reason this matters so much is in the United States, we have about we have 10 billion a month of appliance replacements, right? HVAC, refrigerators, water heaters, et cetera. And about 4 billion of that is low, moderate income. Right, so whether it's the landlords that are paying for it or whether it's the low moderate income consumers directly. And a lot of those folks are paying 30% interest because they put it on their credit card. It's an emergency. And so figuring out how we actually make sure that folks do 2 things, right? One is they get the most efficient units so that they actually save money over time, right? So they don't make a bad purchase in terms of something that might have been lower upfront cost but higher operating costs, right? And 2, make sure that these units actually have the VPP capability in them, which almost all smart devices do now, because then they can opt in to these programs to save them money by enrolling in demand flexibility. So if they get the wrong appliance, then they don't actually get access to the additional savings, right? So we got to do both.
Yeah.
And in your big innovation here is where other folks are just giving folks directly a loan. In this case, it's tied to the meter so that if they leave that residence, they don't have to keep paying for appliances they're not using.
Exactly.
All right, got it. So let's just tie this together now, right? So we're in a place where we've had no load growth for 20 years, roughly, or most of the load growth you've been able to offset with efficiency.
That's right.
Today, right, because of President Biden's craziness on bipartisan infrastructure law and IRA, we got like gigawatts and gigawatts of new load coming in from new manufacturing plants, and all these new electric vehicles, and all these new heat pumps, and all this stuff. And so in some ways we could say he's saving your business, because, I mean, like, who wants to be part of a business that doesn't grow? I mean, come on. So you guys are growing for the first time in 20 years. You're welcome. And so now you got to actually do something with all this growth, right? And one of the options...
We have to decarbonize while that growth is happening. Too.
Right, and one of the options is rooftop, right? We have, NREL's rooftop potential study shows that we got 300 gigawatts easily of rooftops that are available, that are cost effective, that we can put solar on today, right? And so that compares to roughly, 1,100 gigawatts or so of generation in the country today. Obviously, a lot of that can run at higher capacity factors than solar. And then if you add batteries, then, and the dispatchability piece of it, then it's less offensive to you guys. And this industry can do 300 gigawatts fast, right? I mean, China did, I think, 100 gigawatts a year in distributed generation in the last 2 years. So we actually have the ability to move very quickly to actually, get us back to a point of energy abundance and reduce costs for everyone. But it requires a level of coordination with you guys. And some of that coordination is around standards, right? Interoperability, Absolutely. Some of that stuff. And some of that also is just compliance, right? Like not every piece of hardware on the floor here at this show who claims to meet all the IEEE standards, et cetera, actually do. So there's sort of like testing requirements. Mm-hmm. Is that something you guys look at? Like, are you guys working with EPRI and others to try to make sure that some of these devices get tested and approved before they get on your grid?
Yeah, and so I'm on the advisory board of this one EPRI project, and it was very much the VPP setup. It was almost like a control every major load source at the home, have batteries, the EV, water, HVAC, right, pool pump. And what we found is there is a disconnect of the communications between these different devices, because we don't want to just say, hey, consumer, you only get to pick from these devices, right? We want it to be as open as possible so the customer can pick what best suits them. And I mean, you just name it, like a firmware update on one of the inverters, then no connectivity at all, right? Or there's issues. Like, it was not smooth at all. In addition, just taking up an entire wall of the customers, like with all the conduit.
They weren't doing anything with that wall.
Yeah. So there's a lot of progress that we have to make on that interoperability, that visibility, the latency, and this goes across the board, starting at the OEMs all the way to the installers, where we're looking to you to help bundle all these resources together. If you're selling solar, make sure you situate them with a smart thermostat at the same time, right? Like what other
it's
things?
It's like $89.
And well, if you enroll them in our program, it's probably free, the smart thermostat. So
these guys are wealthy enough to come here. They can afford $89. They can just throw it in.
That's right. That's right. You heard it from him. Just give all your customers free thermostats. But seriously, if you want to help your customers, just enroll them in a DR program. You can give from our marketplace, so you'll get like $50 off right out of the bat. You enroll them, you get $75, and then the customer gets money every year they're signed up. They get a bill credit. It's a no-brainer. These are the things that we have to bring all together and work seamlessly, but there's still a lot of progress on the standards, as you mentioned, in the connectivity.
That's great. All right, so now I just want to make sure that we're covering both residential, because it seems like we talk about residential even though I don't think we mentioned them, but also C&I, right? Commercial industrial is a big part of this, right? Those are sort of the traditional areas where we've done demand response and some of those other programs already. For a lot of those rooftops that you could put, a megawatt solar system on with battery storage, a lot of those guys are the ones who want to, put in electric trucks, do other things, right? And so does this conversation look any different when you're talking about C&I?
Not necessarily. I think the key thing is what type of off-site renewable options can we provide? So a data center, such concentrated load, there's no amount of rooftop solar that's going to offset.
No, they're going to go nuclear.
that, right?
We already talked about that.
So,
I mean, we got to share some with other generating technologies. It can't just all be solar. Oh,
all
maybe
the
it
above.
can.
So one of the things that we're the first utility to file a 24/7 clean energy tariff, and so that allows a large manufacturer, large data center, to contract with a basket of different clean energy resources. So nuclear is the backbone of that, actually, and they can add energy storage to fill in gaps to match it to their load profile, to get that 24/7, 8760, clean. Matching, and so we're pretty proud of that, and so that'll help some of them that don't have enough on site. And then we recently increased the cap significantly of how you can net meter, what type of system size and everything. So we're working to really engage that market segment, which, as you note, they've been involved in like interruptible rates before and things like that, but now it's time to take it to the next level.
That's great. So, I mean, I do think that, through this conversation, my sense is that there is a lot of distributed generation desire on your part, right? Putting more load next to, more supply next to load, because, you've got only so much transmission distribution. You're going to upgrade as much as you can. Some of it you have to do because it's old. But at the end of the day, even with grid enhancing technologies, reconductoring, some of these other technologies, it's still going to be good for you to have more supply closer to load and not have it all transmitted, 700 miles to.
It's part of the all the above. And so one of the first things we put in our IRP plan and our carbon plan is we want customer-sided resources first, and then fill in the gaps with the larger scale things.
That's a big deal.
So that's huge for the utility to say that. So that's why all of you that are holding on to like the old utility wars, like just let it go, okay? Because it
bury
is
the hatchet.
Bury it, move on. But we do need that all the above approach, not just on the supply side, but on customer premises.
To be clear, they're not going to move on until you expand your 60 megawatt pilot.
Well,
that's embarrassing to everyone here.
Everyone's like, oh my God, Texas is doing 80 megawatts? This 60 megawatts in a state, it's like a fraction of the size of Texas, and it's just one of my states. So I think we're doing okay. We have other programs, but we need to add more energy efficiency, more DR capability, dispatchability. It cannot just be solar only. And to your point, how you brand yourselves is going to be key, because
we are VPP.
There you go.
Say it. All right.
Say it.
Thank you, Lon. This was fantastic.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, everybody.
Glad I woke up early.